Okay, so first I'm recording now. This is the Augur call at record time for June 25th, which there's a movie quote I will use later. I am not able to make Dawn host
I just
or
did it.
co-host. Okay.
Okay.
All right, so you should be set now.
Okay, so you should be able to see that, right?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, perfect. So as I mentioned, one of the things I look at is, this is basically, let's look at this one first. This is timely responses. So this is time to first response. And what I look for is more than 90% of pull requests being responded to within 2 business days. So you can see the turn team has done an incredible job of keeping up with their pull request and responding in a reasonable time frame. This is a trend that I have been seeing in all of our projects. So this is what I'm calling the pandemic gap. So this
Pandemic
is,
gap.
well, you can clearly see this is when people started, this is when the whole pandemic thing started, and people are less productive. They've got their kids at home while they're trying to get work done. And so all of our projects across the board are starting to you're starting to see gaps in the responses, timeliness, and also, so the other one that I look at is, so this one's less bad. So they tend to close most of their pull requests every month. So I think this last one's just a bit of a gap.
Yeah.
And
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, so like what we've seen on some of like Zephyr, and I think I've seen this in other cases. The pull requests, there's pull requests that in this core group of people, everybody knows everybody, and those get closed like within a day.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's pull requests, and the larger they are, and if the person's from the outside, they'll stay open for months or
Mm-hmm.
even a year. And sometimes they, like I would say about a third of the time on Zephyr, eventually they get merged. But it's that it's a new person, it's a complex pull request, and it just stays open for, like, they're not normal, but they happen like regularly.
Totally. And that's one of the reasons that I look at 90% of pull requests. And this only goes red if it's less than 5 out of the past 6 months. So you give them like a 1-month pass, like maybe people were really busy or somebody was out on holiday. And I think 90% is reasonable, because like you said, you will have some of those pull requests that just don't make any sense to merge right away.
Yeah, for sure.
And then you can see the contributor risk assessment as well. So I look at the threshold is 70% of commits, and I like to see ideally 3 people making up more than 70% of the commits. This one's not too bad because Nisha and Rose are both, it's relatively balanced over the past, and I think this is over the past year. So it would worry me more if this was like one person was like, I don't know, 60%, and the other person was a lot less. So this is not too bad in terms of relatively small project. So, I put it kind of at risk, but I also look at this as an opportunity for mentoring. So are there some of these people that would be interested in contributing more that we could mentor, and they could become more active in the project? So that's one of the things. And I try to frame all of these as not as healthy and not healthy, but as, kind of healthy and at risk, because those are ones that you need to dig into a little bit more, because just because this is red doesn't necessarily mean bad. And some projects might have really, really valid reasons for doing things the way they do that cause them to show up as at risk on the health metrics. And so I think it's something, it's an opportunity for improvement, but not necessarily an issue, depending on the project. And then the other thing I look at is releases. So are we making releases? What I recommend is at least 5 in the past 6 months. So, and these aren't big releases. This isn't like, major release, but
Right.
even just like little minor point releases. But for most projects, if it's of any size, you probably want to have a release at least once a month, if nothing else, to fix security issues and dependencies. and make updates for security reasons, but also, you know, bug fixes, features, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the other thing I've noticed, not every project releases on GitHub. So I have a lot of projects where this statistic doesn't actually apply. And there are lots of them that are valid reasons, like for example, like Helm charts get released somewhere else into the Kubernetes ecosystem and the CNCF. So lots of things that are more like package related get released into package managers, and they don't necessarily get released per se on GitHub, which is fine. That's not a bad thing. It's just the way that certain types of projects work. Any questions on the metrics? I've talked a lot.
Yeah, I think especially for the Google Summer of Code students who are working on, you know, some of the data collection and the insight workers, maybe you have some questions about what kinds of things can you not answer that you'd like to be able to, that maybe machine learning would help you with, as an example.
Oh, wow, that's interesting.
Like what are the sort of mysteries, like there, because you have thousands of projects that you're looking at, and you can't like sit there and compare 1,000 projects unless you like take a year on a desert island and turn off your phone. So I mean, are there things that you wish could be brought to your attention as they happen or in short order that are just hard to see at the broader scope?
Yeah, I mean, but I also think that you guys are on the right track with some of the insights. I mean, I haven't really used them, to be honest, because I know they're still kind of work in development. But yeah, like I would want to know if something big changed for some of the projects that I care about. So I don't care about all 1,000 of those repos. I'll just be honest. Like
Right.
some of them
Yeah.
I could give a crap. And I only run these metrics only run on maybe 150 projects, 150 repos, because you have to have a certain amount of activity for these metrics to make sense. And so
Right.
I'm basically saying 60 commits over the past 6 months, so roughly 10 commits a month, gives me enough data for most projects to run this kind of analysis. But yeah, I would be interested, especially for projects that are important to me. So like, you know, I might be interested if something big happened on turn, like all of a sudden the uh, time to first response jumps drastically. That would be interesting to know. But I also don't care about that for a lot of the projects. So it would be interesting to me to be able to do that for just a few repos that I care about. But yeah, like any anomalies in this type of data. So anytime like particularly things like response rates, or you know, if all of a sudden they were to stop merging pull requests or closing pull requests, those kind of things,
Yeah.
or if issues are being neglected for a period of time.
Yeah, and I think the current Insight Worker does do that kind of anomaly detection where we essentially, you set a training period. So if the training period, for example, if you think your baseline is like the last 3 years, like, and you use that, then that establishes that, you know, there've been weird things that have happened over the last 3 years, but that if we basically take that period, that would be normal.
Mm-hmm.
Or if we say, you know, things were crazy 2 years ago, but for the last year, it's been pretty normal. And I just want to see anomalies that are different than what's happened in the last 365 days.
Mm-hmm.
And so it trains the Insight Worker that Gabe's built so far, trains a model just on 5 major metrics that people care about. And I can't remember what they are. They're like pull requests, comments, issues, commits, those kinds of things. And if there's anything that's outside of a range, he submits it as an anomaly, or it gets pushed as an anomaly out to both the Insight dashboard, which is not perfect yet. But it will be in the next release. We introduced a small error where the length of it is not the length of the project; it became the length of the training period. So it's sort of, or no, it became the length of the anomaly period. So that makes it even weirder, because if you set like a 21-day anomaly period, like I want to see anomalies for the last 21 days, and you only see the last 21 days, well, It doesn't look like, you can't tell what the anomaly is because you can't see the history.
Yeah.
And then we also have a Slack bot that works, that has one small defect in it where if you change the repos, it overwrites the old repos that you track. And so those developers graduated, and I'm just working on enticing them to come fix those bugs. So that's where that's at. Thanks, Don. I think this is really helpful for our Google Summer of Code students to just kind of see what Augur does and how it's used. I think when you just look at our quote unquote dashboard or the front end, it's really hard to know that there's this incredibly rich, intensely verified data model behind it, and that actually, if a person knows SQL and Python, you can produce some pretty cool stuff. Do you mind if I share my screen?
Yeah, do it.
For a minute. I just want to show you, Don, and everyone else, one of the, I think, really cool things. And also, by the way, I want to recognize Ivana, who works with Don, who implemented the release worker, which once we do our next release, will actually show you the dates of all of the releases of all of your repositories. And it will also, I believe there's a separate contribution that's really important, which will identify repositories that are forks from elsewhere, because maybe you don't care about those as much, and also repositories that have been archived and when we caught the archive. And knowing that you're still gathering data on an archived repository is kind of important, because sometimes you don't know that a repo's been archived. So I'm gonna share my screen right now.
And while you do that, I have one quick question. When do you expect that data to be populated in the database?
So this,
In my database, selfishly.
Let's see. Oh, okay. Gabe says he's at the dentist and he can't be there. Okay. I'm just telling him. I don't want to. I mean, my tendency will be to. I thought we would have released much earlier this week, and I'm not exact. There've been a few little, like, every time we run it, we find like one more little thing, and they are like really little things, and they're maybe not things that should be holding up a release, but there's a piece of code where rate limiting isn't handled exactly right in some situations. So like there are a few conditions where if you run out of tokens, essentially if you're running 6 or 7 workers at the same time, they can both grab the same token and be using credits on the token with GitHub, and there's no coordination across their use. And so on large collections, we have these anomalous situations where sometimes, especially when we're running our tests, we get this token collision, and then the worker breaks. So like that's the biggest issue that we're trying to get fixed before we put it out. And this might be a case where I tend to go too much into the weeds sometimes, and maybe this is a case where I should step back and say, you know what, this only occurs for you, and stop making it a problem. Anyhow, so what I wanted to show you is Andrew Brain, who I always have to struggle to remember his name because it's a very cool name, but his last name's actually Brain. And so he's been taking off with what Gabe and you started with the use of these Jupyter notebooks. And what we're doing now, and the thing about Jupyter notebooks, for those of you who use them, is for me, it's always, where is the one where the thing that you want to show works? Because we've developed this to the point now where you can see this, basically this image. So this is all first-time contributors per month for the Jenkins X project. And one of the things I've been very insistent about in the generation of any visualization is that we have to output it to a file. I think that's important because people aren't interested, people who are going to consume this don't want to run the Jupyter Notebook. They don't want to see the Jupyter Notebook. Like we're comfortable in it, but regular folks aren't. So we just want them to be able to hit a button and get these outputs. And when they hit the button and get the outputs, I think it's really critical that the caption is there, because if you take away the caption, it doesn't tell you what the label of the graph and the numbers on it don't make it clear what it is. And so I'm just going to do what I never do in class. I'm just going to read the caption. This graph shows all the first time contributors, whether they contribute once or contribute multiple times. And then it defines new contributors are individuals who make their first contribution in the specified time period. So this is a graph that doesn't differentiate the type of contribution. It just says, here are the people starting in, so the start date of 01/01/2018 is the start date for the report. The start date for looking at new contributors is all of the history of the repository. So it's not if it's not your first contribution since 01/01/2018, it's your first contribution ever. And the report period I'm interested in is this report period. And so this is all of the total number of people who make their first contribution in a given month. And this is, Don, you know, this is important for projects because getting new contributors is one way that you know that you're able to continue sustaining a project that you want to continue, right? And then the next is what we call drive-by first-time contributors. So these are basically contributors who make one and only one contribution to the repository, and that contribution is in the specified time. So new contributors the definition is the same. It's just that this is the count of people who make one contribution and never make another one. And the term for that, and I don't know if drive-by, I don't know if we are over defining drive-by in that way. Like if drive-by is a little more refined than you make one and only one contribution. But maybe we should use a different word. I don't know if anybody, Don, what do you think? Is this the right use of the term drive-by?
Other people have asked me that. I think Matt and I had a long conversation about whether drive-by was a good word to use. This is consistent with how I think of drive-by contributions, but they are most associated with drive-by shootings, which means that
Yeah, in American
maybe it's
culture.
not in American culture, so maybe it's not the best term, but I don't think Matt and I ever came up with anything better either.
Yeah. No, our problem with it is everybody in the open source world knows what a drive-by
Yes.
is.
It's like
And
bus factor. I try not to use
yeah,
that because it's like if somebody gets hit by a bus, and that's really macabre, and I don't really want to go there, but that's what everybody knows that metric as.
yeah, I do use that in my classes because it gets a laugh.
Yeah, it gets it. People remember it.
Yeah. But so yeah, I wish, yeah, hopefully we can come up with a better term than drive-by, but because the world knows what it means. So these are the new contributors who just never come back. And they're if they do come back and make a contribution in June or July of this year, then they're no longer in the drive-by bucket. Like that 5 in December of 2018 could go to 4 if one of those people makes a second contribution. And then yeah, and again, so the important thing is that the output that we generate is graphics files that include this and the caption that we then put in a report. These are repeat first-time contributors per month. So maybe we could call them non-repeat, like instead of drive-by. But repeat first-time contributors in a month these are people who make their first contribution in a month, and then at some point later on make at least one more contribution. So it gives you an idea of if you have any, but what is the stickiness? So in September of 2018, I have 11 people who are repeat first-time contributors, and in that same month, I have 4 drive-bys. So something about people making contributions in September of 2018 maybe went well, or maybe a new organization started contributing to the project. But like I would look at that and I'd be curious why that is, and because that isn't an anomalous month when you compare it with the rest of the graph, right? And then is this kind of interesting to people to see this output, or should I send something out on the internet later.
Well, I find this interesting. I would,
Okay.
if you could send me a copy of this notebook too when
Oh,
you're
I
done,
totally will.
that would be awesome.
I totally will. Andrew, I'm just like wanting to make sure I have the right, again, this is, Andrew and I just need to check back with each other and figure out which one, because there's like 20 notebooks in different folders now. And because he's working, all my folks are working alone and he's working on these Jupyter notebooks, which are all completely standalone. I just have to figure out what is the one I can share. Like which one works in all cases, because you can see I'm in a template folder. So we've taken the reports that we've done for individual repositories and we've made them parameterizable, basically, where you just put in your database credentials and you put in the repository IDs and you go off and you run the reports for however many you want to see this information for. This is the second time contributors. So these are people who are basically not the drive-bys. The total first time contributors plus the drive-bys and the second time contributors should equal all of the all the new contributors in a month. And then farther down, we actually break it down by type of contribution. And I think, so there are 6 types of contributions that we're counting. And another thing that we want to be able to do is to have you be able to run this report and say, you know what, I don't want to count issue comments or pull request comments. Like, I'm not going to consider that a contribution. I want to maybe I just want to look at issues opened, pull requests opened, and commits as first time contributors. But I think the comment data is interesting to include because you can see there's a decent number of people whose first contribution, in fact, is a comment, and that's one way to engage people. So this is the same data, but it's broken down. It's a stacked bar chart that shows you the type, and also generates the caption as part of a output graphic.
Can I ask a question here? Because I see that you consider this as part of the metric, but sometimes, for example, I can use something, can have some issue and just, I might be having an issue with something I use and just find it on GitHub and write one comment. And I did this several times on projects I have nothing in common with, and it's not always an actual contribution. So do we do some analysis of the one comment contributors?
We could. So the data behind this graph it's in a data frame. It's in a pandas data frame, and we could pull out all the people who, for example, did issue comments, and we could actually then query what were those issue comments that they made. Like, I know I do the same thing. Like, if I see an issue, sometimes I'll just make a comment like, yeah, I'd really like to see this fixed. Like, in fact, in the Boca project, which we use for visualization, there's a few issues where I've made just one comment. So I guess I'm a repeat contributor where I'm like, yes, I'd like to +1 on fixing this. Is that the kind of thing you mean, Ivana?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So those, and that's why you could choose to run this report without the comments you can just exclude those from what you label as a first time contribution. And I think it depends on your project. I know, like in my case, I actually did a pull request on somebody's Medium code because I did a demo of how AMD video cards they have experimental and proven algorithms, and I did a machine learning task against a bunch of images that Gabe and I have been working on, and showed that the experimental version actually didn't do anything, and so I did a pull request, and I also created a README and did some very small contribution. Took me like an hour, but I just fixed the things about the code that annoyed me, and then never went back, right? So I think that's like a drive-by. Like, I'm a total drive-by on that repo. But yeah, and so this is these are the same, this is the same things. They're just stacked bar charts in this case. So there's no difference in the actual data. It's just showing you the type of contribution. And then there's also a summary number of, so there's 138 total contributors to the Jenkins X platform over its life. 43.48% of those contributors only make one contribution, and 56.52 make more than one contribution. And so this is I think a nice illustration of, like, if you did this for all of your projects, you would get a sense of, and all of your projects, like when we look at most GitHub orgs or collections that community managers are interested in, there's usually like 1 to 5 repos that are really important, and then some ancillary things that kind of don't matter, but they're curious to keep track of. So, but I think this is one where it's pretty useful. And then down here, this combines in a stacked bar chart the drive-by and repeat contributor counts per month. So separates the type of contribution and says how many of your, and you can see again your September 2018, it really stands out in this chart that you had a lot of repeat contributors, and the way I had, my screen doesn't show you this, so repeat is the orange, and fewer drive-bys. And obviously if you, it's part of this is like the function of time. Like if you're a first-time contributor in March of this year, the likelihood that, this is kind of interesting anomaly in March, that you've got repeat contributions already from 5 of the 7 people who were first-time contributors that month. Usually I would expect not to see that, but it looks like they made a really good push in these months. And I think that's the end of this report, but this report and a pull request report, Andrew is finishing up, and I'll just stop sharing real quick and say that we are going to share these GitHub, these Jupyter notebooks with the larger world, and Dawn will share them with you first. As soon as I'm just going to message Andrew while I'm doing that.
I can play around with them and find the bugs for you.
Yeah, that's perfect. So with that, I think we have our Google Summer of Code students online, and one of the cool things that we do on the Augur calls this summer is let them share a little bit about what they're doing. And I want to do a little fast today. And I recognize that Zoom doesn't show people in the same order on everyone's screen. So the order I see is Abhinav, Akshara, Pratik, Sarit, Tianyi, and Sai. And so I'm just going to call on you in that order, just to give like a 1-minute summary of what you're working on right now and any update. I think the most important thing would be just explain briefly what you're trying to accomplish right now, this, like in general this summer, and where you're at this week. Like keep it to like a minute if you can. Abhinav, you're up.
Yeah. So the worker-based authentication and refactoring was done, basically to incorporate the GitLab API responses. This last week I started working on the merge request worker. So till now I have completed comments, merge request, contributors, events, labels, fetching. So there are, I think, a total of 9 tables which need to be populated, and 6 of and collection methods for 6 of them have been written. So I think by next week merge request worker should be done.
Perfect. That's awesome. Thank you, Abhinav. And Akshara?
Yeah, I've been working on the message uniqueness and sentiment analysis detection. And in the next coming weeks, I would be analyzing the trends of the positive and negative sentiments, and starting with the making of workers for uniqueness messages for the table which Gabe set up for me, which is the message analysis table.
Right. So the idea is, are there, and Akshara identified, I think, some like what are obviously to me bot messages, where there's this one repeated message, I forget what it is, that's in like hundreds of comments. It's pretty clearly a bot. So
Yeah.
that's there's a couple different folks approaching machine learning. I believe from a computational linguistic perspective, using some computational linguistic tools that I think will be interesting. Pratik.
Yes, so I'm working on Insight Worker, and my project is to find anomaly detection, to find anomalies in different metrics like number of pull requests, number of issues, number of comments, and also number of contributors. This time series metrics, and till now I'm kind of clustering the activities of the repos, and so I'm using unsupervised algorithm to cluster the repos with high activities and one with low activities, so that I can easily apply different model on both the clusters, so that it will be easy to find the anomalies based on their categories. So I'm using LSTM for the highly active repos, and I think the STL decomposition would be good till now, but I have to search a lot, search quite a bit in the next few days.
So what Pratik identifies as a common machine learning problem, which is machine learning likes lots of data. Not all repositories have a lot of data, but some of the low activity repositories are important. So he's building on the work that Gabe did, looking at anomalies in metrics, which are mostly counts of things, and providing algorithms or additions that function better at the low end and at the high end, so that we use the right algorithm for the properties of the repository. Sarit?
Hi. So,
Hey.
okay, I was working on the clustering of the repositories, and we talked about how to present the results so that it's more intuitive to the end user. And so I came up with a table which now shows the repo gate, repo name, and the cluster it is assigned to, and also the topic that a particular repo is related to. And that's been done using a topic modeling approach, which basically finds the probability distribution over the topics, and each topic would in turn be probability distribution over words. So that way we know what each of the repo is about. And that's one approach to clustering, and another one would be using the parts of speech and the words indicating the emotions. So we found that some of the repositories, they have been assigned to different clusters in like 2 approaches. So
Right.
yeah, and except that I did look into few of the works which try to find the conversation mechanism in terms of the complexity of the discussion. So probably I'd want to look into that as well. For example,
the sequence analysis we talked about.
Right. So yeah, that would be my next,
So that, when Sarit and I talked earlier this week, I mentioned that Carolyn Rose at Carnegie Mellon and I did a lot of analysis of online learning conversational sequences. So instead of just looking at a single set of texts, also Josh Introne at Syracuse and I have done the same kind of work where we look at sequences. So what is the conversation like? How does the conversation evolve? And order of conversation is a significant signal, but it's much harder to get at. And so Sarit is actually, I hope I'm remembering this right, you're a graduate student, right, Sarit? Right. So Sarit is doing some more advanced things than, for example, Akshara, who just finished her first year of college. So we have different folks who are focusing with different levels of experience and all doing really great work. It's really cool to see the progress. And I'm pretty excited about the sequence analysis and also about your use of information retrieval to identify topics of discussion in repositories. I think that will prove very useful, Sarit.
Okay.
Thanks. Ivana, I kind of updated people about what you were doing earlier. Do you want to say anything?
Yeah, if you mentioned it in the first 10 minutes, I don't know if I will repeat now.
I think you were here. I essentially mentioned that you'd built our release worker and also did the work now to identify if it's an archived repository or if it's a forked repository or a fork.
Yes, and now I started some work on the CLI. For logging, I added error. I added a command for retrieving errors from logs, and yeah, there were some things I'd like to ask you here. Do you have in mind some analysis that we would like to add to those functionalities?
So
Because I'm going to use them for the API. I mean, we'll have the similar logic as in the CLI.
I can tell you, I have done 98% of the server testing for Augur, and any command line tool that would go through the log files and identify errors and stack traces for those errors. So I know there's an error file and there's also a complete log file. Basically anything that would concisely give me a list of the things I need to look at and maybe the line numbers in the log that where the issues of the stack traces exist would save me a ton of time, because when I run a test, it takes about a day or 1 to 2 days, and then going through the logs to identify the errors takes a half a day, and then I communicate back to the team what I think I found, and they look into it. So anything that would, I mean, you know what it's like. You've troubleshot stuff, but I'm usually troubleshooting a release with, now I think it's 9 or 10 workers in them all at once. So anything that pulls out information that makes that process go faster, you are my personal hero, and I will send you chocolate or American beer or anything that you like. If you can figure, anything you do to make that part easier would be wonderful, really helpful.
That's great, because by now it's the error CLI is just exposing the error, but I can improve that so that it gives more specific information you can retrieve.
That would be great. As always, you know, use the 80% rule. You know, don't like, you don't have to, like, you know, 80% of the 20% of the 80% of the value is delivered by 20% of the work. So you don't have to build the ultimate log tracing tool, but anything is better than what I have now. I haven't tried your new functions yet. Actually, I think I just merged the pull request yesterday, but I'm excited to try it out.
You can just type, you can also review errors for specific worker.
I saw that.
If you use this CLI in some other environment, you can separate the workers this way. But I want some more analysis on that. And would you like some cron jobs, or you write your own? Would you like some such functionality that will be easy to use within Augur, or you're using something side of the project and just using CLI?
So one, I would say 2 things. One, I would say, like, you work for an organization with Dawn, and if there's a log analysis tool that is like an open source project that sort of does that work already, I'd rather use someone else's tool. And if you have one that you favor, wrapping that kind of automated stuff into an existing open source project is better than building it on our own. If there isn't such a thing that's easy to use, and that really just wrapping all those CLI functions in a worker, so that every time there's an error, the worker sends a message to some place that you designate, would be great. And then I also have some complete yeah. So I think it maybe ask around or ask Dawn inside your organization, which is VMware, what tools you might use for log checking, to see if there's one that you could just plug your work into. And if there's not, then write it as a worker and we can talk about that offline. We're over time technically, but let me just, thank you, Ivana. Let me just give Tianyi a quick minute to chat about what he's working on, or they're working on.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. What I do is network analysis among the open source trace data, and because I think all the users and the repositories on GitHub can construct a complex information network. So what I do is to figure out what the relationships those people and those repos are, and the method I use is the heterogeneous information network modeling language. So I figure I make a schema, network schema according to the pull request model. And what I do in last few weeks is I found a feasible way to model those relationships, and I made some demonstration. So what I'm doing in this week is I'm trying to implement the algorithm called GraphSage. Is a graph neural network method that can be used to learn the network representation. So
and one of the things I'm doing with Tianyi is we're building a extremely large collection with Augur of I think you sent me a list of 1 million repositories.
It's I give you the top 109,000.
100, yeah. So the top 109,000. So we're gonna make an Augur database of the top 109,000 GitHub repositories, and he's gonna look at that as an experiment, in addition to some of the other large repositories we have. And then Sai, we just have a few minutes, but I want to give you a minute to talk as well.
Yeah, sure. So I'm working alongside Abhinav on the GitLab issues worker. So basically, similar to the GitHub issues worker, we're collecting the issues, issue comments, and everything related to issues, and trying to push them into our Augur schemas. So I worked on, so we're almost at the end of the issue worker, just doing a little bit of testing here and there. So to find if we have any bugs to squash. So that's my update.
And when you say end of the issue worker, you mean just basic issues? You haven't gotten to messages and different. You haven't gotten to the full equivalent functionality of the GitHub worker yet, right?
I'd say.
Or have you?
I think I have. Yeah, I have. The issue messages, comments, labels, assignees.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much it.
Okay.
Just trying to find out some bugs if there are any.
Yeah,
right
so
now.
we may have a fuller set of GitLab functionality by the end of the summer. Thanks to having you all work together. I'm going to stop the meeting because we have a minute before the next meeting on this channel. Thanks everyone for sharing the work that you're doing. I'm very excited about it and look forward to seeing you on the next Augur call and chatting with you on Slack or whatever other medium we communicate on. Thanks a lot. I am stopping recording.